"Marry my ugly daughter or leave," the cowboy agreed. But when he lifted the veil, he froze. Jacob Hayes rode into the small frontier town just as the sun was dipping behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Dust rose in soft clouds from the hooves of his horse, Old Blue, who had been with him through countless journeys. Jacob had been traveling for weeks, moving from one ranch to another, seeking work and a place to settle. The life of a cowboy was not easy, but it was the life he knew best: long days, open skies, and the satisfaction of honest labor. The town was quiet, with only a few people moving about. Wooden buildings lined the main street, and the smell of wood smoke mixed with the faint scent of hay from the nearby barns. Jacob dismounted near the local general store, tying Old Blue to a post. His sharp eyes scanned the town. It was small, but there was promise. He had heard whispers that work might be found on the Bennett family ranch, just beyond the town's edge. Jacob adjusted the brim of his hat and walked down the dusty road, boots crunching against the dirt. As he passed by the town square, he noticed children playing with a makeshift ball, their laughter echoing against the wooden walls of the buildings. There was a sense of life here, but also a weight of quiet expectation, as if everyone had settled into a routine that rarely changed. He approached the Bennett Ranch, a large wooden structure that sat on a gentle rise overlooking fields of dry grass. The sun caught the windows, sending sharp reflections that made Jacob blink. He knocked on the heavy front door, and moments later it creaked open. A tall man, stern and commanding, looked down at him. This was Mr. Bennett, a man whose reputation in the town preceded him. He was known as wealthy, proud, and unyielding, with little patience for nonsense. "Can I help you, stranger?" Mr. Bennett's voice was firm, leaving no room for small talk. Jacob tipped his hat politely. "Sir, my name is Jacob Hayes. I've been looking for work." "I hear you might need help on your ranch." Mr. Bennett's sharp eyes studied Jacob from head to toe. The cowboy looked respectable enough, though his weathered face and worn clothes showed the marks of a life spent on the open road. There was something steady and dependable in the way he carried himself. "You're a brave man coming here alone," Mr. Bennett said, stepping back and crossing his arms. "But I don't just hire anyone." He paused, as if weighing whether to speak further. Then, in a tone that left Jacob momentarily confused, he said, "I have a different offer for you, one you might not expect." Jacob frowned slightly. "I'm listening, sir." Mr. Bennett's eyes narrowed, and he gestured toward the back of the house. "My daughter, Clara, she needs a husband. She's not what most men would call attractive, but she is my daughter, and I want to secure her future. So here's the deal: marry her or leave." Jacob blinked, caught off guard. He had heard of odd arrangements before, but this was unlike anything he had imagined. He opened his mouth to respond, but Mr. Bennett's gaze was firm, leaving no room for argument. I suppose," Jacob said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady, "you mean as a business arrangement? Not love." Mr. Bennett's lips pressed into a straight line. "Love comes later, if it comes at all. Right now I need assurance that my daughter is cared for. She is shy, awkward, and plain to look at, but she is a good girl, and I will not have her left to the mercy of idle men. So, will you agree?" Jacob rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the back window of the house where he thought he saw a figure move. He hadn't met Clara yet, and the thought of marrying a stranger was unsettling. But he also understood the reality of life on the frontier. Opportunities like this were rare. Having a home, land to work, and a chance to settle down, it wasn't something every man could afford to refuse. "Sir," he said finally, I will do it. I will marry your daughter." Mr. Bennett's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained calculating. "Good. Then it is settled. The wedding will be in 2 weeks. That gives her time to prepare and you time to adjust." Jacob nodded, though his mind raced. He had agreed to something far beyond his usual comfort zone. But he reminded himself of his purpose: a steady life, security, and the chance to prove himself. Love, if it came, would come later. Over the next few days, Jacob found himself visiting the Bennett Ranch often, helping with the horses, repairing fences, and learning the rhythm of the land. He worked diligently, careful to earn the respect of the ranch hands and Mr. Bennett, who watched his efforts with critical eyes. Despite the unusual arrangement, Jacob found satisfaction in honest work and the simple routines of ranch life. He also caught glimpses of Clara. She was quiet, moving through the house with careful steps, speaking softly to the servants and children alike. She avoided direct attention, her head often bent over chores or sewing. Jacob noticed her hands, gentle but capable, her eyes focused and sincere. She did not speak much, but when she did, there was a quiet intelligence in her voice. Jacob began to feel a mixture of curiosity and respect. Clara was nothing like the idle, shallow women some men in the town spoke of. She was kind, thoughtful, and patient. Jacob found himself looking forward to the moments when their paths crossed, even if he didn't fully understand why. The townspeople, however, did not share his quiet observation. Rumors spread quickly, as they always did in a small town. Some whispered that Jacob had lost his mind, agreeing to such an arrangement. Others speculated about Clara's future, wondering aloud if any man could truly be happy with a wife who did not meet the town's standards of beauty. Jacob heard bits of these conversations, and while it annoyed him, he tried not to let it affect his focus. As the wedding day approached, Jacob continued his work on the ranch, but he also found himself paying attention to small details about Clara. He noticed how she hummed quietly while feeding the horses, how she laughed softly at the children's jokes, and how her eyes seemed to light up when she saw a sunrise over the fields. These small observations unsettled him in a way he could not explain. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence on the edge of the property, Jacob paused to watch Clara from a distance. She was gathering firewood, her figure framed by the golden light of the setting sun. He realized he had underestimated her. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that drew the eye, even if it wasn't the kind of beauty celebrated in the town. He shook his head, reminding himself that he had agreed to this as a practical choice, nothing more. "Mr." Bennett noticed Jacob's attention and approached him silently. "Pay no mind to what the town thinks," he said, his voice low but firm. "Clara is more than they see. Some things only reveal themselves over time. If you are patient, you will understand." Jacob nodded, though he did not speak. He had never been a man to dwell on appearances, yet he could not deny that he was beginning to see something in Clara that went beyond her looks, or what he had been told about them. He turned back to the fence, hammer in hand, feeling a strange sense of anticipation for the future he had committed to, one he could not yet fully imagine. As the sun dipped lower, Jacob finished his work and mounted Old Blue, riding slowly back toward the town. The sky was now a deep violet, and stars began to appear, twinkling faintly in the cooling evening air. He thought about the coming days, the preparations, the ceremony, and the unknown that awaited him. He could not predict how this arrangement would unfold, but he felt a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. Jacob knew that life on the frontier was full of unexpected challenges, and this was perhaps the most unexpected of all. Yet, as he rode through the quiet streets of the town, he felt a quiet resolve settle within him. Whatever the outcome, he would face it with the same determination he had brought to every task in his life. The story of Jacob Hayes and Clara Bennett was about to begin, and though he could not see it yet, the first threads of a remarkable journey were already weaving together. The day of the wedding arrived with a quiet tension hanging over the Bennett ranch. The sun rose slowly, casting soft golden light across the fields, as if nature itself was aware that something important was about to happen. Jacob Hayes awoke early, the weight of the upcoming ceremony pressing on his mind. He had spent weeks working alongside the Bennett family, growing familiar with the land, the routines, and quietly with Clara. But despite this familiarity, the thought of marrying a woman he had never truly spoken to filled him with nervous anticipation. Jacob dressed carefully, choosing his best clothes, a simple but neat shirt, a worn leather vest, and pants that had been mended countless times. He wanted to appear respectable, to honor the arrangement he had agreed to, even if it felt strange. Old Blue, his loyal horse, was brushed and saddled, ready for the small ride to the chapel where the ceremony would take place. Inside the house, Clara Bennett moved with quiet purpose. She had been awake long before sunrise, her mind racing with worry and excitement. Today was the day she had always feared and hoped for at the same time. The villagers had often whispered about her appearance, calling her plain and awkward, but Clara had learned to ignore their words. She knew her worth was not measured by how others saw her, but by her kindness, her intelligence, and the strength she carried quietly in her heart. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her veil, making sure it rested neatly over her hair. The veil was simple, white, and modest, much like her own personality. She glanced at herself in the mirror, wondering what Jacob would see when he lifted it. She did not know much about him, only that he was a capable, quiet man who had agreed to this marriage. Would he see her as others did, as plain and unremarkable, or would he notice something deeper, something only she could offer? Downstairs, Mr. Bennet oversaw the final preparations. He barked instructions to the servants, arranged chairs for the guests, and made sure that everything was in place. His stern expression softened slightly as he glanced at his daughter. "She's a good girl," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "I hope he knows what he's agreeing to." Jacob arrived at the chapel just as the first guests began to trickle in. The small wooden building was decorated with simple flowers and ribbons, the kind that could be found in any frontier town. The townspeople had gathered, curious to see the unusual arrangement unfold. Some whispered, others stared openly, and a few shook their heads in disbelief. They had all heard the story, that Jacob Hayes, a respected cowboy, had agreed to marry Clara Bennet, a girl they considered plain. Jacob walked slowly down the aisle, his boots stirring up small clouds of dust on the wooden floor. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of the townspeople. He saw curiosity, doubt, amusement, and a few kind smiles. He felt a mix of embarrassment and pride. This was a significant moment, not just for him and Clara, but for the entire town. When he reached the front of the chapel, he caught his first clear glimpse of Clara. She stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, the veil obscuring her face. The simplicity of her dress and the modesty of her posture did nothing to diminish the quiet strength that radiated from her. Jacob felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mix of respect, curiosity, and a spark of something he did not yet understand. The ceremony began, and the words of the minister echoed softly through the wooden walls. Jacob and Clara exchanged glances occasionally, shy and cautious. They did not speak much, for the tradition demanded formality, but their eyes communicated small bits of understanding. Clara's hands were steady now, though her heart raced. She could feel Jacob's presence beside her, solid and calm, like the ground beneath her feet. As the minister spoke of commitment, trust, and partnership, Jacob found himself reflecting on the weeks he had spent at the Bennet Ranch. He remembered the quiet moments, the way Clara had helped the younger children with their lessons, how she had guided him through unfamiliar chores, and the little kindnesses she had shown to everyone around her. These memories softened his resolve, replacing the detachment he had carried with something more human, more real. Finally, the moment arrived. Jacob reached for Clara's hands, his own feeling rough and calloused from years of work, yet warm and steady. He could feel her trembling slightly, and he offered a small, reassuring squeeze. Clara looked up at him, meeting his gaze through the thin veil, and for a brief moment, the world outside the chapel seemed to disappear. There was no gossip, no judgment, no doubt. Just the two of them, connected by circumstance and by choice. The minister asked the final words, and Jacob repeated them carefully, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Clara responded in kind, her voice soft but clear. They had done what they had come to do, they had become husband and wife. But the moment of truth, the one that would reveal everything, was still ahead. Jacob reached forward to lift the veil. His heart pounded, not with fear but with anticipation. He had expected nothing remarkable, perhaps a timid smile or a shy glance. He had prepared himself for awkwardness, for the plainness that others had described. But what he saw as the veil lifted made him freeze. Clara's face was not what he had expected. Her eyes were bright, full of warmth and intelligence. Her smile was gentle yet captivating, a reflection of the kindness and strength he had glimpsed in her over the past weeks. Her features were delicate, balanced, and honest, not the kind of beauty praised in town gossip, but the kind that left a lasting impression on those who truly saw it. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The townspeople held their collective breath, unsure what to expect. Some had already turned to whisper, but they stopped as they saw his reaction. He did not recoil, nor did he frown. He simply stared, stunned by the unexpected depth of Clara's presence. Clara's cheeks flushed slightly, but she held her gaze steady. She had known that appearances could be deceiving, but she had never seen someone react with such openness and sincerity. Jacob's stillness was not disdain or disappointment. It was awe. It was the recognition that the person he had agreed to marry, the girl he had been told to expect, was far more remarkable than he could have imagined. The minister, sensing the pause, continued softly, reminding them of their vows and the importance of mutual respect and understanding. Jacob shook himself slightly, returning to the moment, but the impression of Clara's face remained, etched into his mind. He realized, in that instant, that the weeks he had spent with her had already taught him lessons no one else could. After the ceremony, the small gathering of townspeople moved outside to the open yard for the reception. Simple tables were set with homemade bread, butter, and pies, along with jugs of water and lemonade. Children ran around, laughing and playing, while adults exchanged cautious smiles. The town was curious, yes, but also hopeful. Perhaps this union would prove that true connection was deeper than appearances. Jacob and Clara stood together, side by side, accepting congratulations and well wishes. He could feel her hand in his, warm and tentative, yet confident. She did not speak much, but her presence was strong and steady, a quiet reassurance that all would be well. Jacob, in turn, felt a shift within himself. He realized that what had begun as a practical arrangement could grow into something meaningful. As the afternoon sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the yard, Jacob and Clara found a moment alone. They walked along the edge of the fields, the golden light warming their faces. Jacob finally spoke, his voice soft and thoughtful. "You're nothing like I imagined," he said. Clara's lips curved into a small, amused smile. "I could say the same about you," she replied gently. There was no mockery, no judgment, just honesty. For the first time, Jacob felt a spark of genuine curiosity, a desire to know more about the woman he had married. He realized that this was only the beginning, that there was a world of discovery ahead of him, about Clara, about himself, and about the life they would build together. As the evening settled in, the town slowly emptied, leaving the couple alone on the quiet ranch. The stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, reflecting the sense of wonder and possibility in their hearts. Jacob looked at Clara and felt a deep sense of respect and admiration. He had agreed to a practical arrangement, but he had gained something far more valuable, a partner whose quiet strength and hidden beauty would reveal itself over time. That night, as they shared their first meal as husband and wife, Jacob could not help but smile. The day had been unusual, filled with nerves and expectations, yet it had brought clarity and hope. He realized that marriage was not simply about appearances or social arrangements. It was about understanding, respect, and the willingness to see beyond the surface. Clara, for her part, felt relief and excitement. The day had been challenging, yet it had also shown her that Jacob was not the kind of man to judge or mock. He had agreed to this marriage with practicality, yes, but he had also responded with honesty and sincerity when he saw her for who she truly was. The night settled in around the ranch, and the couple sat together by the fire, sharing stories and laughter. They did not yet know what the future would hold, but they felt a connection that promised more than either had anticipated. The journey of discovery, trust, and partnership had only just begun, and both Jacob and Clara understood that the most meaningful experiences often came from unexpected beginnings. The morning after the wedding dawned crisp and bright. The air smelled of fresh earth and sunlight, a promise of new beginnings. Jacob Hayes woke before the first hints of sunlight crept over the hills. He lay for a moment in the quiet of the Bennett house, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch waking up, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of a barn door swinging open, and the gentle rustle of trees in the morning breeze. Today, Jacob knew, would be different. Yesterday had been filled with ceremony, with smiles and polite conversation, and with the first strange glances exchanged between him and Clara. But today promised something more intimate, more revealing. He had agreed to this marriage as a practical decision, but he could not ignore the curiosity building within him. Clara Bennett, the girl whispered about in the town as plain and awkward, had captivated him in a way he did not expect. Downstairs, Clara moved quietly through her morning routine. She had risen early, as she always did, and her mind wandered over the events of the previous day. The wedding had been strange, yet full of small moments that stayed with her. Jacob's hands, though rough and calloused, had been gentle when they held hers. His eyes, though cautious and measured, had looked at her in ways that others never had. Clara paused at the window, watching old blue grays in the yard. She wondered what Jacob was thinking, whether he had been surprised by her, or whether he saw her as the townsfolk had described, A girl without charm, without beauty. A small smile curved her lips. She knew the truth, appearances could deceive, and the heart often saw what the eyes missed. Jacob stepped outside, dressed for the work of the day. He had promised Mr. Bennett that he would help with the morning chores, and though the wedding had passed, the life of the ranch continued. The land needed tending, the horses needed care, and the cattle needed feeding. Life did not wait for ceremonies or celebrations. "Good morning," Clara said softly as he passed through the doorway. Her voice was calm, almost musical in its simplicity. "Morning," Jacob replied, tipping his hat. He felt a strange tension in his chest, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. He could not quite place it, but he sensed that today would reveal something important, not only about Clara, but about himself. They worked side by side in silence at first, mending fences and preparing the horses for the day. Jacob's hands moved skillfully, threading rope and hammering nails with practiced ease, while Clara fetched water and organized supplies. Though they did not speak much, the air between them was filled with unspoken understanding. They were learning, slowly, the rhythms of life together. At one point, Jacob paused, leaning on his hammer to catch his breath. He looked at Clara and saw her hair catching the sunlight, golden highlights shimmering in the morning light. Her eyes, usually cast downward in quiet modesty, met his for a moment. There was a strength in her gaze, a confidence that he had not expected. For a brief second, Jacob felt a rush of emotion, a recognition that she was more remarkable than he had imagined. "You're very capable," he said finally, his voice low but sincere. Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. "I try," she replied, her voice modest. "It's important to do what needs to be done." Jacob nodded, impressed by her practicality and determination. He realized with a quiet astonishment that she had more depth and intelligence than he had anticipated. The townspeople's whispers about her appearance seemed foolish now, shallow in comparison to the quiet strength and grace she exhibited. Later, they moved to the barn to tend to the horses. Jacob began brushing Old Blue, his movements careful and precise. Clara approached, holding a small brush in her hands. "May I?" she asked. Jacob stepped back slightly, nodding. "Of course." Clara's touch was gentle but firm, her movements confident and practiced. She worked methodically, making sure Old Blue was calm and comfortable. Jacob watched her, fascinated by her skill and care. He realized that this quiet, plain-looking girl possessed a depth of character and capability that few men, or women, had. As they finished with the horses, Jacob's mind wandered. He thought back to the moment during the wedding when he had lifted her veil. He remembered the shock that had washed over him, the unexpected beauty beneath the modest exterior, the warmth in her eyes, and the subtle confidence she carried. That moment had changed everything. It had opened his eyes to the possibility that he might not only fulfill a practical obligation, but also discover a connection that went far beyond appearances. By midday, the sun was high and warm, casting long shadows across the fields. Jacob and Clara paused for a brief rest, sitting on a wooden fence and looking out over the land. The silence was comfortable, filled with the quiet sounds of the ranch, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of grass in the wind, the faint clatter of tools in the barn. Clara spoke first. "Do you ever wonder what people expect us to be?" she asked softly. Jacob looked at her, intrigued by the question. "All the time," he admitted. "They think they know everything about a person based on how they look, how they speak, or where they come from." "But it's never that simple, is it?" Clara shook her head. "No, they rarely see what matters most, the parts of us that are quiet, strong, and real." Jacob smiled, feeling a quiet warmth spread through him. He realized that Clara's words reflected his own thoughts, the same recognition that had struck him when he first saw her after the veil was lifted. There was more to her than anyone had guessed, and he was beginning to understand that true connection came from seeing beyond the surface. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden clatter from the barn. One of the younger boys had dropped a bucket, sending water spilling across the floor. Both Jacob and Clara sprang into action, moving quickly to prevent a mess and calm the horses. The coordinated effort revealed an unspoken harmony between them, a partnership in action that felt natural and effortless. After the chaos subsided, Jacob and Clara laughed softly, the sound mingling with the warm breeze. It was a simple moment, but it left an impression on both of them. They were beginning to understand each other, not through words alone, but through shared experience, through the small acts of daily life that built trust and respect. As the afternoon wore on, Jacob suggested a walk to the nearby river. Clara agreed, and they set off together, the tall grass brushing against their legs as they moved. The path was familiar to Clara, who had spent countless hours exploring the land, and she led the way with quiet confidence. At the riverbank, they paused to rest. The water flowed gently, reflecting the clear blue sky and the sunlight that danced across its surface. Jacob watched Clara as she knelt to touch the water, her fingers creating small ripples. Her reflection shimmered in the river, a reminder of the moment that had first caught his attention, the unexpected beauty, the quiet strength, and the unassuming grace. Jacob felt a sudden need to speak, to acknowledge what had been on his mind since the veil was lifted. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but gentle, "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect you to be, well, everything you are. I thought I was just agreeing to a practical arrangement, but now I realize I might have misjudged everything." Clara looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a calm understanding. "Jacob, appearances are never the full story," she said softly. "We are more than what the world sees, and perhaps in time we will learn more about each other than anyone ever could guess." Jacob nodded, feeling a sense of relief and anticipation. The truth in her words resonated deeply. He realized that he was not only married to a remarkable woman, but he was also embarking on a journey of discovery, learning to see clearly, to appreciate the quiet strength and hidden beauty that others overlooked. They stayed by the river for hours, talking about small things, sharing laughter, and discovering the subtle details of each other's personalities. Jacob learned about Clara's love for simple pleasures, the way she enjoyed the rhythm of the ranch, the songs she hummed quietly while working, and her fascination with the patterns of the clouds. Clara learned about Jacob's life on the road, the hardships he had faced, and the lessons he had learned from a life spent in open spaces. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun had begun to dip low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields. They moved together in easy silence, comfortable in each other's presence, the awkwardness of the past replaced by a growing sense of partnership. That evening, as they prepared for their first dinner as a married couple without the presence of guests or ceremony, Jacob felt a quiet sense of awe. He had entered this arrangement expecting practicality and routine, yet he had discovered something far more profound, a connection, a mutual respect, and the promise of something genuine. Clara, for her part, felt the same. She had been nervous, uncertain, and wary of expectations, but Jacob's sincerity and openness had reassured her. She realized that the man beside her was capable not only of fulfilling the duties of a husband, but also of understanding and appreciating the person she truly was. As night fell over the ranch, the stars emerging one by one in the clear sky, Jacob and Clara sat together on the porch. The quiet of the evening wrapped around them like a soft blanket, a perfect ending to a day of revelation. Jacob glanced at Clara and felt a deep sense of gratitude, for her, for the unexpected beauty of the day, and for the life they were beginning together. He knew that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but he also understood that they would face it together, with honesty, respect, and a growing bond that went beyond appearances. And in that moment, under the vast, star-filled sky, both Jacob and Clara felt the promise of a future filled with discovery, partnership, and the quiet, enduring beauty of truly seeing one another. The days that followed the wedding were filled with a quiet sense of routine, discovery, and growing companionship. Life on the Bennett Ranch moved at its steady pace, and Jacob Hayes found himself adjusting not only to his new role as a husband, but also to the subtle rhythms of life shared with Clara. Each morning began with chores, feeding the horses, checking the fences, gathering eggs from the hens. But now the work felt different. It was not merely duty or survival. It was part of a shared life, a partnership built on respect and slowly deepening affection. Jacob had always been practical, seeing the world in terms of necessity and survival. But Clara had brought a new perspective into his life. Her quiet wisdom, her careful observation of the land and animals, and her ability to manage the household and ranch tasks with efficiency and grace impressed him constantly. She noticed things he might have overlooked, the slight weakness in a fence post, the way Old Blue favored one leg while walking, or how the youngest calf seemed hesitant at feeding time. and she acted on these observations with calm precision, quietly guiding Jacob when needed, but never in a way that felt intrusive or controlling. Jacob, in turn, showed Clara the skills he had learned over years on the frontier. He taught her how to read the weather in the clouds, how to recognize the subtle signs of illness in livestock, and the best way to mend a fence quickly and securely. She absorbed each lesson with patience, often asking thoughtful questions that showed her sharp mind and practical intelligence. The exchange of knowledge between them created a subtle bond, a mutual respect that slowly grew into admiration. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, and the air carried the golden warmth of late afternoon, Jacob suggested they take a walk along the ridge overlooking the ranch. Clara agreed, her expression calm, her mind at ease with the familiarity of the land and the presence of her husband beside her. They walked slowly, their steps unhurried, and spoke in soft tones about matters both trivial and meaningful. Jacob looked at her, studying the delicate line of her jaw, the quiet strength in her posture, and the way her eyes seemed to reflect the world around her. "I didn't think I would ever find someone like you," he said softly. "Someone so capable, so thoughtful, and so real." Clara glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You give me too much credit," she replied. "But I see the same in you. You work hard, you care for the land, and you notice the small things others might ignore. That matters more than anything else." Jacob nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that the respect and admiration he felt were deepening into something more profound, an affection that was growing steadily, quietly, like the roots of the trees around them. For the first time since agreeing to the marriage, he wondered if love, in its own patient and subtle way, might find its place between them. The townspeople watched the couple with cautious curiosity. At first there had been whispers and raised eyebrows. How could a man like Jacob be happy with a girl deemed plain by the gossiping tongues of the town? But as weeks passed, the observers began to notice the ease with which Jacob and Clara worked together. There was a quiet harmony between them, a partnership that spoke louder than any outward display of beauty. Children playing near the ranch would run to them without hesitation, and neighbors noticed the way Clara laughed easily with Jacob, and the way he always treated her with patience and consideration. Jacob began to see the change in the town as well. People who had once mocked Clara began to treat her with respect. They noticed her intelligence, her ability to manage the household and the ranch, and the quiet confidence that shone through in her every action. Jacob realized that their marriage, unconventional as it had begun, was slowly teaching the town an important lesson. That true worth and beauty are measured by character, kindness, and competence, not by appearances. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and purple, Jacob and Clara sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Old Blue grazed quietly nearby, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the ranch settling into night. Jacob reached for Clara's hand, holding it gently in his own. "You know," he said softly, "I think I understand now why my father always said that the right person can change your life in ways you never expect. I didn't come here looking for love, but I think I may have found it anyway." Clara's eyes sparkled in the fading light. "Jacob, I never thought I would be someone anyone would see that way, but you've shown me that there is more to life than what people say or think. You've made me feel valued, respected, and even seen." Jacob smiled, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift from him. The arrangement that had seemed strange, even uncomfortable at first, had led him to something far more meaningful than he could have imagined. He realized that the unexpected nature of their marriage had allowed them both to discover each other in ways that a traditional courtship might not have allowed. The seasons began to change, bringing new challenges and new opportunities for the couple. Spring rains softened the earth, allowing crops to grow, and Jacob and Clara worked together in the fields, planting seeds and tending to the land. Their cooperation was seamless. Jacob's knowledge of the land combined with Clara's careful planning and attention to detail ensured that the ranch thrived. Summer brought long, hot days, and the work of managing the cattle and caring for the horses grew more demanding. Yet despite the physical labor, Jacob and Clara found moments of joy and laughter. They swam in the river, shared quiet meals under the shade of trees, and watched the stars together at night. Their bond deepened, not in grand declarations but in the everyday acts of life, helping each other, learning from each other, and supporting one another through challenges. Autumn arrived with a crisp chill in the air. The leaves turned brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold, and the ranch took on a warm, rustic beauty. Jacob and Clara spent long evenings walking through the fields, discussing their plans for the future. They dreamed of expanding the ranch, improving the land, and perhaps one day starting a family. Each conversation, each shared plan, strengthened the trust and affection between them. Jacob began to understand that the beauty he had first noticed beneath Clara's veil was more than skin-deep. It was her intelligence, her patience, her kindness, and her unwavering sense of responsibility that made her truly remarkable. He saw it in the way she cared for the animals, the way she nurtured the children, and the way she approached every challenge with calm determination. Clara, too, saw the depths of Jacob's character. She admired his work ethic, his honesty, and the quiet strength he displayed in every situation. She realized that the man she had married, initially out of practicality, had grown to embody the qualities she had always hoped to find in a partner: integrity, patience, and a willingness to see beyond appearances. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the main room of the house, Jacob looked at Clara and spoke softly. "I never imagined that this marriage would feel like this. At first, I thought it was just an arrangement, a necessity. But now I see that it's something much more. I feel like we are building something real, something lasting." Clara reached for his hand, her eyes shining in the firelight. "I feel the same way, Jacob. We started this in a way that others might not understand, but I think it has allowed us to see each other clearly without pretense or expectation. And that is rare and precious." They sat in comfortable silence, letting the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the night fill the space between them. Jacob realized that he had come to the Bennett Ranch expecting practicality, but he had found partnership, friendship, and the beginnings of love. Clara realized that her quiet life, once filled with doubt and worry about how others saw her, had blossomed into something meaningful because of Jacob's respect, attention, and care. The years that followed were not without their challenges. Droughts tested their resilience, storms threatened the crops, and the demands of running a ranch were never-ending. Yet, through it all, Jacob and Clara faced each day together, relying on their shared knowledge, mutual respect, and deepening bond. They celebrated small victories, healthy crops, a new foal, a well-fenced pasture, and they comforted each other during hardships, learning that life's strength often came from partnership and perseverance. The town continued to watch them, gradually shedding old judgments. The whispers about Clara's appearance faded, replaced by respect for her competence, intelligence, and the quiet dignity she displayed in every action. Jacob's reputation as a skilled and honest cowboy was enhanced by the way he treated his wife, with patience, fairness, and visible admiration. Together, they became an example in the town, demonstrating that true worth was measured not by appearances but by character, integrity, and the ability to work together. One evening, years after their first meeting, Jacob and Clara stood together on the porch, looking out over the land they had nurtured and grown. The ranch had flourished, reflecting the care and effort of both of them. Jacob reached for Clara's hand, and she took it without hesitation, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You know," Jacob said softly, "I can't imagine my life any other way. I came here expecting practicality, but I found something far more valuable: partnership, trust, and love, and I have you to thank for that." Clara smiled, a quiet, warm smile that carried the history of their journey together. "And I have you," she replied. "You've taught me that strength, patience, and kindness matter more than appearances. We've built something together that will last, and that is worth more than anything else." Jacob and Clara stood in the fading light, hand in hand, knowing that their story, unusual as it had begun, had led them to a life of fulfillment, respect, and quiet happiness. They had discovered that true beauty lies in character, true strength lies in partnership, and true love often comes in the most unexpected ways. As night fell and the stars appeared above the ranch, Jacob and Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The journey they had begun with uncertainty and curiosity had blossomed into something enduring, teaching them both that life's most meaningful experiences are often hidden beneath the surface, waiting for patience, understanding, and an open heart.